this.
Ave Satanas! Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Greetings, heathens. Welcome to Hail Satan. This is the podcast exploring Satanism, culture, and life in general through the eyes of modern Satanists. My name is Joseph Rose, and I'll be your host today. I'm a member of the Satanic Temple, and I'm also a member of a congregation of Satanists called Satanic Delco. On this episode, I'm going to speak with HoneyTree EvilEye. She's a burlesque dancing doctor of sexuality, and she happens to be a Satanist. But before we get to that, we've got a whole bunch of new patrons that have kindly joined our gang here. Let's see, we've got Tomoa, Marilyn, Taylor, Trish, Anthony, Doc, Max, Illusioned, Heater, and Joseph. Thank you guys very much. Of course, I appreciate your support. You guys keep this thing going. And many of these new patrons have already joined up with us at Satanic Delco, but for any of you that haven't yet, please feel free if you'd like. The door is open. We've got some listener mail. Maybe we should get to that. Let's do it. Kat writes in, "Hello, I discovered your podcast recently, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I grew up with Christianity shoved down my throat, and I vehemently opposed it once I got to my teen years. My question is, I identify with the tenets and the activism of the Satanic Temple more than I've identified with anything I've found before, but I'm not an atheist. I'm not theistic whatsoever. I think I mostly align my beliefs with animism. I'm very interested in metaphysics, rituals, manifestation, even witchcraft, but I've never discredited science. Can I align myself with this religion if I don't feel like I'm an atheist? Even if it doesn't work, I'm going to continue to learn about the religion and activism more. It speaks to my soul, and I love listening to you and Mara talk. Thank you for all that you do." So, being unfamiliar with animism, I looked it up. 2 definitions came up, and they are as follows. 1, the attribution of a soul to plants, inanimate objects, and natural phenomena. And 2, the belief in a supernatural power that organizes and animates the material universe. Now, just in case it needs to be said, I'm just a guy. I'm not a gatekeeper for Satanism or any kind of authority figure. I value science, and modern science hasn't found any existence of a soul in any living being of any kind, let alone in an inanimate object. Scientists have also not reported on anything leading them to reasonably believe that there is such a thing. You mentioned the 7 tenets, and tenet number 5 says, beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. According to our current best scientific understanding of the world, there is no soul inside living beings or inanimate objects. Therefore, if someone does believe in something like a soul, they're basing that on faith and not science. The Satanic Temple has a frequently asked questions section on their website, and one of those questions is, do you worship Satan? Their answer states, no, nor do we believe in the existence of Satan or the supernatural. It goes on to say, to embrace the name Satan is to embrace rational inquiry removed from supernaturalism. For some additional clarity, I went ahead and looked up the term supernatural, just to be on the safe side. I have a few of the definitions here. 1, being above or beyond what is natural, unexplainable by natural law or phenomena. 2, of or relating to an order of existence beyond the visible, observable universe, especially of or relating to God or a god, demigod, spirit, or devil. And 3, departing from what is usual or normal, especially so as to appear to transcend the laws of nature attributed to an invisible agent such as a ghost or spirit. So, Kat's question is, can I align myself with this religion if I don't feel like I'm an atheist? I think there are some fundamental conflicts that may keep this flavor of Satanism from being a perfect match with your beliefs. Having said that, there's no reason why you can't have very fond feelings towards Satanism and count yourself as an ally. I don't think anyone would be terribly upset about your particular beliefs, despite the fact that they don't necessarily align exactly. Thank you, Kat. I appreciate it. Our next one is from Peter, P-E-D-E-R. What do you think about the influence music, metal specifically, has had over Satanism or vice versa? Do you think the medium has forwarded the cause, or do you think that Satanist bands like Mayhem do more damage than is fair? Would love your opinion on this as a metalhead interested in Satanism. Okay, that's a good question. On one hand, maybe they do harm because the vast majority of the bands aren't writing about Satanism or presenting Satanism in a way that's actually very true for most Satanists. They're feeding into this over-the-top, scary, creepy uniform that's been done to death for decades now. For a person like me who can see that it's just an aesthetic choice and these guys are using it to appeal to a certain audience, it isn't a big deal. I just mostly ignore them because I don't take them any more seriously than any silly horror movie with occult or satanic themes. Maybe the only real harm that they do is making Satanism seem silly and not something one should take seriously. I guess it only crosses that line when you get into the weirdos out there burning churches and doing hurtful or crazy shit like that. But that's extremely rare, really. If there's an upside, I guess it could simply be that it's exposing kids to the idea of Satanism or rebellion generally, which does have some real value, I think. I know for me personally, the seed of Satanism was planted with the rock and metal music I was exposed to as a very young kid. And then we have bands like Zeal and Ardor and Twin Temple who are presenting different types of music to go along with the imagery that they present. I would love to find more actually good music that is specifically aligned with Satanism. If anyone out there has any suggestions, by all means, send them my way. I'd love to listen to some bands that align themselves with Satanism that aren't, the black metal, death metal, all the more predictable type of stuff, All right, we've got one last question. It comes from Willer Clowns from Outer Space. All right. This may cut against the grain, but I've been thinking a lot about the role of humility in Satanism. What is the role of it? Should we be wary of humility? Should we embrace it? That is a good, interesting question. Let me read you an excerpt from Wikipedia on humility. It says, humility is the quality of being humble. Dictionary definitions accentuate humility as a low self-regard and sense of unworthiness. In a religious context, humility can mean a recognition of self in relation to a deity or God, and subsequent submission to said deity as a member of that religion. Now, honestly, neither of those really fit what comes to my mind when I think of being humble. For me, there needs to be a healthy balance. I guess it would be a balance between confidence and humility. If you live your life thinking you're perfect and amazing and the greatest thing ever, that's obviously going to be a problem. It's certainly going to be a problem for the people around you. Among the primary issues with that one is that you're never going to be truly open to learning new things, gaining new perspective, or changing your mind about anything. But if you carry this low self-regard and sense of unworthiness, that's obviously going to cause its own problems. A healthy balance would mean trying to be realistic about your place in a given situation, even if that situation is all by yourself. I'd say realistic with a slight lean to the humble side might be a good rule of thumb. When I was around 20 or 21 years old, I was 95% sure that I knew everything. I knew all about myself, and I knew all about pretty much everyone else too. I looked at the behaviors of individuals and groups, and I thought I understood why they were the way they were. I could tell you exactly why it was wrong, and I could tell you why my way was definitely better and smarter. Now that I'm over 40, I'm approximately 70% sure that I don't know shit. I learn more about the world and about myself all the time. I've changed my mind about pretty significant beliefs that I held for many years, and I've opened myself up more than ever to new experiences and perspectives. Once you admit to yourself that you don't know shit, you open up so much space in your life to learn more. And again, I know I've probably mentioned it many times on here, but so much of what I'm talking about right now has been enhanced in my life by cannabis and psychedelics. No matter what success you've had in some area of your life, be it personal or professional or whatever, there's likely some other person, people, or factors that came together to play some role in what you've achieved. So be confident in your abilities and your progress. Be realistically proud of yourself for doing your part to create the end result. But at the very front of your mind should be the idea that I could not have done this alone. So, yes, Willer clowns from outer space, I believe we should embrace humility. We should admit mistakes as often as we find ourselves making them. And if you're not making mistakes on a very regular basis, then you simply aren't doing enough. You're not trying enough. You're not pushing yourself. Poke holes in your own life. Actively seek out the problems or areas of weakness within yourself, not to find reasons to feel bad about yourself, but to find areas for exciting potential improvements. Okay? Is that a fair answer? Guys, listen. If you've got a moment to spare, please visit hailsatanpodcast.com. On the website, you will find links to join me on social media. There's a form there to send me an email, which I would love if you could do. Send me a question or feedback on the show or a topic you'd like to hear discussed, anything like that. And of course, there's a button to join us on our fun Patreon account. We've got a few different tiers there. It will open the door to Satanic Delco. It will give you some bonus content. It'll give you cool discounts on a bunch of things. We've also implemented a new Discord server that some people are enjoying quite a bit right now. So come join us. The website is hailsatanpodcast.com. And now, let me give you the chat that I just had with HoneyTree EvilEye. Our guest today is a burlesque performer, a podcaster, a Satanist, and she holds a PhD in human sexuality education. Welcome to the show, HoneyTree EvilEye.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for making the time. I guess we should maybe start at the beginning, as I like to do. Was religion a significant part of your upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it was a very big structure. I not only went to Catholic school K through 12, but my parents were both employed by the Catholic school district.
Oh, wow.
And when they went to work in the morning, they had to be there earlier than I had to. So they would drop me off at church. And so I went to mass literally 7 times a week. It was every morning, Monday through Friday. We had all school mass once a week. And then we also had like family going to church. And yet, despite that, I would not say that either of my parents are actually all that religious.
Okay.
So that's a really interesting facet of that. But yeah, I was steeped in that for years. It was very much a part of my childhood.
So they weren't so serious about it themselves?
I think that it was a cultural thing. I think that's true for a lot of Americans, probably, is that their experience with religion is more of like, especially if you're a white person, there's not a whole lot of culture to grab onto. Sure. So it's like they lean into, whatever communities are established and traditions they have. And when I stopped being a Catholic, I was in high school and I told my parents, like, I'm not getting confirmed. And I explained all the reasons why. And I knew more about the Catholic religion than most adults who do practice it. And so my parents were like, all right. And they stopped kind of going to church too, because I think a lot of it had been like, this is how you parent, is you set up some sort of system for values. And I think that once they realized that, like, I think this isn't necessarily, I don't think this is necessary for her to be a good person. And actually, I don't really care about this either. So they kind of went on their own thing too.
What was the general attitude towards sex like with the family while you were growing up?
That's interesting. I think I got a lot of that American Catholic, like, guilt, body shame stuff. But I was also very fortunate that my mother is a college professor. She's like a theater person and a literature person. So my house was filled with books, and I was introduced to a lot of like theater and film that actually normalized lots of different types of sexuality. And I got to see that other cultures react to it differently. And so even if the messages I got directly in my life from school and that sort of thing were very sex negative, I still was able to see that there were a lot of other ways to do it. And that was very helpful to me.
At home with your parents, they weren't particularly touchy about it or conservative, I guess?
I mean, I think that they have the usual hangups that most Americans of their generation kind of do.
Sure.
And I think that, like, their political beliefs now, like if you ask them now, they're probably both pretty leftist, progressive identified. But like when you have a teenage daughter, I feel like there must be something that happens to people that makes them a little bit more conservative.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have a boy and I don't have those concerns. But yeah, if I had something resembling a typical teenage girl, I can imagine I might just have some protective thoughts or something in my mind. Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I think I try to assume goodwill, right? And I try to assume good tension. And I don't think that most parents are like actively trying to instill their kids with like shame and guilt and that kind of stuff. I think that they are just repeating what they heard. And if most of us don't get any sort of comprehensive sexuality education that shows us a different and perhaps better way, like, how are we supposed to do that, right? Like, if nobody ever taught you math, how are you supposed to teach somebody else math? Like,
yeah, and they probably feel like, well, I grew up this way and I turned out fine, so it works.
Yeah. Basically, it's like, what else is there to compare to?
Right.
So I give them the benefit of the doubt, but yeah, there were definitely things where I look back and I'm like, oh, that was not the way to handle that at all.
Yeah. Was there a certain point when you realized that you might have an above average interest or fascination with sexuality in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually curious if I have a greater fascination or if I just have a greater comfort level, but I definitely was drawn to reading about sexuality even as a very young kid. I think that this is a pretty common narrative among people in the sexuality education field, is that like we were like, oh man, period books, things on erections. Let's read all this stuff as kids, and just like being just like super interested in this really fascinating subject. But like, it seems like everybody is pretty interested in it. It was just that I felt more comfortable going into like the nerdy side of it.
Yeah.
And like that sort of thing. So like most people sexuality seemed to have some sort of major sway over them and impact on their lives. But I think what made it different for me is that I could approach it like an anthropologist and talk about things that I didn't personally experience, and was comfortable discussing those things with people. It didn't make me feel icky. I think that was really the big thing.
Do you remember at what point Satanism first appeared on your radar?
Oh, that's such a good
and maybe
question.
what you felt about it.
I don't know if I distinctly remember like a first thing about it, to be honest. I guess there was a like this is going to be a real basic answer, but when I decided I really wanted to like label my belief system that way was probably just reading about the Satanic Temple. I mean, I wasn't necessarily a fan of like LaVey's work so much because he's a little bit more of a libertarian.
Sure.
So it didn't really like jive with my political beliefs. But I think finding out about like the lawsuits that the Satanic Temple was doing, and I was like, okay, all right, I see. And then just reading the tenets, I was like, that actually is much more in alignment with my belief system than any other organization I can think of. And while I'm not like technically active with them now, I was for a while. I realized that my particular spiritual beliefs are probably not best in an organization run by humans. Like that's just,
Sure.
I think they're separate. So I'm not necessarily involved with them now, but I think that they raised my awareness of it and then allowed me to read other people's work and the artists that use Satanism in their imagery and to learn about it more on my own.
Have you had any issues, I guess significant issues, with either identifying as a Satanist or with the sexuality related things?
Well, I mean, it depends on what is significant. Like, I definitely know that all of my choices around being an open person, being a sexual person in public, as a burlesque performer, as a sexuality educator, those sort of things, is definitely closed doors. There are jobs I know I didn't get because of that. So that's definitely like just a decision I made. And I think that it's just very similar with Satanism, which is like, if I'm out about it, what happens is that it's a little bit of a lightning rod. You're going to find cool people that you would not necessarily have otherwise. And you're also going to find out that other people are like intolerant and uncomfortable and whatever. I think they both function very similarly. And for every door that it closes, it ends up, really clarifying that wasn't a door I wanted anyway.
Right.
I would not have been happy had I walked through it anyhow. So there's this paralyzing thing that happens with choice. There's actually a study that was done many years ago where it was a video game and people had the option to like go forward. But like, if you go past this point, the doors that are behind you, you won't be able to access anymore. And so many people had a hard time moving forward because they didn't want to lose those doors. And in reality, like most doors aren't for us and we can't go through most doors. Like we can only go, like you can meander and you can wander around. And I think you have a lot more. I think we all have more options than we necessarily think we do, but like, don't have to be pleasing to everyone. And I don't have to be right for every job. I just want to find the stuff that is actually cool for me and the people that I actually am going to vibe with. So yes, it has caused problems, but I think it's definitely counterbalanced with the good.
Yeah, you certainly can find your own niche or, just the things, like you said, the things that are more of a natural fit probably work themselves out over time. Why do you think there seems to be such an overlap between Satanists and things like BDSM, polyamory, and alternative lifestyles generally?
I think that there's multiple facets to that. And one is that when you realize that your sexual orientation, and I should use I statements actually, when a person realizes that their sexual orientation is not vanilla or hetero or, something of that nature, it is one of the first opportunities to really think about how many things that I was taught are truly like just facts and how many things are actually quite optional. And for instance, when somebody realizes that they're queer or they realize they're kinky, that's the first chance to be like, okay, actually, some of the things that I've been like assuming are just like universally true are actually wrong. And I'm actually not broken and terrible and all that kind of stuff. And it allows us to reconsider everything else. And what Satanism to me is just that questioning, right? Like that's the whole idea, is that like, we don't believe it simply because an authority tells us so. And we're not going to live our lives based on the dictates of someone who, like I've never met, or like, they don't have to live my life. And so when you start opening those doors, then you're like, oh, here's some other stuff I might want to check out. And maybe people stay away from being poly or being kinky because of some other thing that has constrained them in. And maybe it's a traditional religion. So I think it's that. And then it's also just like, there are people that hold what I would argue are probably Satanist beliefs, but they're not going to call themselves that.
Right.
And I think that Satanism definitely has an appeal to people who like a certain type of aesthetic. And like, we're also more likely, I think, probably to like wear a lot of black, like ride motorcycles. And there's just a bunch of stuff that we're like, we all found this like stuff that we liked. And it's not like it's a uniform. You don't have to. It's just like, we like the imagery of it too. We like the big pageantry that comes with a lot of kink scenes. There's an appeal to that.
Yeah, I guess because there is this overlap, I wonder if one is serving as a bit of a gateway to the other, or even is there maybe a perceived inherent sexual culture associated with Satanism? Maybe the alternative lifestyles or kink scenes serve as an entryway to Satanism, and even vice versa. Someone with an interest in Satanism then finds all of this other stuff.
I mean, I think that the belief in bodily autonomy is one of the things that really separates Satanism from a lot of other religions, right? Like there are people whose religion tells them your body doesn't even belong to you. And that to me is obscene. The idea that there's some being, or person or whatever who gets to dictate what I do alone by myself to my own body. Like, fuck off. Get out of here.
Yeah, that's scary.
Like, the idea that, the body is like some kind of vessel that needs to be maintained as pure, to me is also gross and weird.
Yeah. And
it's also a big part of rape culture, right? Because then we maintain that idea of purity in a very gendered way. And we end up, enforcing the idea that anybody who has abuse, committed upon them is somehow less pure, as though that's their failing, as though that's their shame, when it's actually the shame is on a person who doesn't respect consent. And so many traditional religions have this entirely backwards, and they reinforce rape culture through these ideas of your body doesn't belong to you, and you're bad if you experience pleasure doing these things. And it's just so deeply messed up. And it is a source of incredible guilt and shame that causes relationship problems and personal psychological issues for the rest of many people's lives. It's deeply, deeply troubling. And Satanism is like, no, actually, it belongs to you, and nobody else gets to say what happens to your body except for you. And if you want to pierce it, tattoo it, have somebody spank you, get tied up, that's your business. And there's lots of science about why pleasure and pain are interconnected. They're more of a Venn diagram than an actual line. There's a lot of neurological research on this, that it's really, there's a lot of overlapping happening in your brain between pain and pleasure. And if you like that, go for it, dude. Yeah.
When we look back at the earlier years, the beginning of modern Satanism, we often see Anton LaVey, and he's surrounded by naked bodies, and they're really celebrating the idea of indulgence over abstinence. That was a big thing with them. The Satanic Temple, on the other hand, doesn't really seem to focus on that type of imagery at all, even going as far as removing the breasts from Baphomet in order to present a less offensive image to the general public. Do you think that one direction is particularly better than the other, or more true to what Satanism represents, in your opinion?
Well, I'm a very sex positive and nudity positive and hopefully body positive person. I think that's like more of a quest than it is like an identity that I can claim. But when I look at LaVey, I'm like, that's cool. Like I see especially how it exists in its cultural context, that like it looks like burlesque to me. It looks like
Yeah.
one of those like retro exploitation films. Like it looks like that kind of thing where the history of those forms of media is interesting because like as a woman in, let's say, like the 1940s, if you wanted to live a life of your own design, let's say you didn't want to get married, you didn't want to have kids, there are very limited opportunities career-wise in many ways, and to be able to support yourself. And one of the things that I love about the history of burlesque is that it's been populated by these like rebel women and queer people, and it's always been a place for gender nonconforming people and for queer people that you could go make really good money, a hell of a lot more than you're going to make at like the telephone company, and you didn't have to get married, and you could go do whatever you wanted, and you could travel with it. And so that imagery to me of like LaVey and all of these like naked ladies and, you know, that kind of stuff, it just aesthetically reminds me of that. And then I think that the politics of it are a little bit more patriarchal than I actually really want to get involved in. And the Satanic Temple, I can't really like explain why, you know, they made the decision to take the breasts off. Like I give them the benefit of the doubt that they thought that it would just get like shut down, which is probably true given what happens like on social media, like female presenting nipples, right? They're evil and bad. So I don't, I don't know that they're necessarily like sex negative, but I think that they are not trying to cater to the same imagery as LaVey and trying to separate themselves from that kind of idea. So I don't know if it's like a good or bad within the context of Satanism, though. I think that we can be overtly sexual or we can choose not to be. And the key is that it's a choice and it is not a performance that we have to do.
Yeah.
So like I have a satanic metal burlesque troupe. So like I like that part of it. But if somebody made me do it, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah. In the case of the Satanic Temple and Baphomet, I do think, I can't pinpoint it right now, but I'm sure I've read that they did change it to not have breasts in order to avoid the opponents of that being able to say it's offensive and use that as more ammunition to keep it away. So it was a compromise that was made for possibly good reason.
Yeah, because I mean, like there's so many things where if you just want to get your post up on Instagram so you can talk about whatever real issue, you just got to make sure that you don't violate their super arbitrary community standards about nudity. Yeah. So I understand that life. Yeah.
So I have one last question for you here, and it's actually a question that was submitted to the podcast by a listener that requested to remain anonymous. And it's a bit of a long one, but if it's all right with you, I'd like to maybe get your answer rather than mine.
I'm interested.
All right. This listener writes in, I'm dealing with an ongoing issue related to sex and Satanism. Let me start by saying the tenet I am drawn most to is tenet number 3, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. While I am 100% all in with abortion rights, bodily autonomy, and consent in all forms, I also feel this tenet extends to meeting one's sexual needs and being empowered by our own sexuality. Now back to my dilemma. I've been married for 13 years. Long story short, not the most satisfying in the physical or romantic love areas overall, but beautiful random babies and deep financial entanglements have kept us together. Feelings are mutual here, and all sex is gone. We've been sleeping in separate rooms for almost a year now, and quite frankly, I'm kind of tired of hailing myself, if you catch my drift. Although, since we're still technically together, yet also working toward a thoughtful, mutually agreeable divorce, I can't, for lack of a better term, hold out for much longer. Through my rediscovery of Satanism, I've been taking pause on just fucking someone responsibly for a while now because I have an inherent internal guidance to be empathetic and compassionate. Herein lies some bounce back to tenet number 1. How does tenet number 1 rank when it becomes detrimental to oneself and tenet number 3? Is this not my body and my body's needs? Are these needs and therefore my body subject to the will of someone else? As a Satanist, what the hell am I waiting for? It's a tricky one.
Well, yeah, it's also a pretty, like, this is like it's going to sound silly, but that's a super common
Yeah.
question too, and not necessarily phrased in the structure of Satanism, but this is one of the most common questions people will write to sexuality educators about in general.
Sure.
So I want to break apart all the different things happening here. And the first one is, it sounds like they are on their way to a separation in general. That sounded like that's happening and mutually agreed upon breakup. So I think that's a really important piece to point out. The other thing I would like to say is that, our bodies are clearly our own and subject only to our own will. That said, when we enter into agreements with people and make commitments to things, we have decided we're going to either share that ownership, or we're going to give someone access for a little bit, or we are going to just, agree to clean the bathroom or whatever it is, right? I've agreed that we are going to enter into this domestic partnership, to this romantic partnership, the sexual thing. And when we do that, we are always welcome to renegotiate. Like, just because we have agreed to something in the past does not mean that that is the thing we have to stand by forever, especially as situations and feelings change. And that is part of whether you're consensually non-monogamous or if you are monogamous. Like, you can continuously renegotiate the boundaries of the commitments that we make, because that is like an active, living, loving relationship, as opposed to a structure being imposed upon the people in it. And so what I would say to this person is, sounds like you're horny and I want you to get laid. Do whatever it is that you would like to do. But before, like launching into a new situation, I think the ethical thing to do is just be upfront about it. Like, if it's a mutually agreed upon breakup, there's a really good chance that other person will be like, oh, thanks, Satan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Satan. I was feeling the same way. Maybe we can, negotiate, because it sounds like there are children. Maybe we can, trade off who's taking care of the kids, and we can both get our needs met. I think that the important thing here is that, like, we don't have to compromise one value for another. Just like, be an adult about it and speak to this person that you clearly have a history with and shared life with in many ways. Like, respect that person enough to be real with them and just say, like, look, this is what I got to do. And we're already breaking up. So, like, I would like to go do this. And you can decide amongst yourselves, like, are you going to say, like, nothing happens in the house that we share? Okay, that's a thing that maybe we negotiate. Or maybe it's like, however it is, you work it out. Like, you got to take it to a hotel, or just wait until you move out, or like however y'all got to work it out. Or like, but the thing is there's not an excuse to violate one value, like, just because, like, you have every right to have whatever sex you want to. Like, and if you just want to say, I'm no longer in this relationship, this is over, and I don't have any obligations to you at all anymore, that's a choice too.
Yeah.
So
it feels like maybe, neither one of the sort of values attached to the tenets that were mentioned here really needs to be prioritized necessarily over the other. It's almost made a little easier by the fact that they seemingly are communicating their way through a mutually agreeable divorce, is the way it was worded. Yeah. And so at that point, maybe it's only a conversation or two away, like you said, just working out maybe some of the logistics.
This is the thing about so many questions that I get from people in long-term relationships, where they're going to tell me stuff that they won't tell their partner.
Yeah, of course.
It's the funny thing. It's like, you can say what your needs and your wishes are. That's not the problem. You communicated it to me.
Yeah.
People will tell me stuff in an elevator. They'll tell me on a train, like, you don't know who I am. You have no reason to believe that I'm going to respect and care about you and hope for your best outcomes. I do. I just happen to. But, like, this is a person, this partner, this soon to be ex-partner, with whom you have established trust and with whom you've experienced many things. Give them the opportunity to be cool.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some nuance in there that isn't included in the email, but yeah, it looks like there's possibility for this to go in a good direction.
Yeah. Like, I feel very strongly that this is an intelligent person, a thoughtful person, and that if we all cultivate the skill of, rather than coming up with a solution and trying to argue for it, instead getting comfortable with saying what our feelings are and going to a partner and saying, like, here are my fears and here are my hopes and here's how I feel right now. And this is what I want and this is what I don't want. And then together you can work as a unit, as a team, to come up with a mutually agreeable outcome.
Yeah.
Rather than approaching things as like, all right, I've already decided how to fix this, and now I just have to argue my case in court.
Yeah.
Because nobody ends up happy when it's adversarial like that.
And this one even seems potentially made a bit easier by the simple fact that they plan to separate and divorce when you compare it to your average dead bedroom within a marriage that's continuing.
Absolutely.
That seems like more of a pickle than this one.
Yeah, I would agree. Because like there's definitely that's more often the case, right? It's like we're still in this and that person doesn't want to have sex anymore, but they also don't want me to have sex with anyone else. And in that case, I'm like, y'all need to go to couples therapy. You need to hash this out, because odds are that this schism is just symptomatic of something else. And like, let's parse that out. And like, let's have a neutral mediator help you parse that out.
Yeah.
But in this situation, it sounds like, this person's just horny, and I get it.
Yeah. It's been a while and it's time. So I would suggest have the conversation, have some conversations. They might be awkward. They might not be the most fun, but I think it's doable.
Yeah. If you've already had the discussion where it's like, we're breaking up, I feel like this is probably not as hard.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I would say good luck to that person.
Definitely. Good luck to you. I hope you hear this answer, and I hope we've touched on something for you.
Yeah, you're gonna be great.
Is there anything else out there obvious that we haven't touched on related to Satanism and the way that it intersects with sexuality and in general?
Well, I don't know how timely this is. I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but like one of the big things that's on my radar today is the Lil Nas X video.
Oh, yes.
And it's Call Me By Your Name, and it's using imagery of Christian heaven and hell and like those ideas, where Lil Nas X, for those who are unfamiliar, is an openly gay rapper. He made it big doing a country song, which in and of itself is just kind of wild. But then I'm just so appreciative that he was able to like transform that into something more than just this novelty. And the video came out, and are some Christians super mad about it.
Yeah, everybody's reacting to it. Like, it couldn't have gone better for him.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone on every side of the fence is all over this thing.
Yeah, and then he started selling Satan shoes, which theoretically, allegedly include like a drop of human blood in them. And like they sold out in a minute.
Yep.
And it's just good for you. Good for you.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the latest news, but Nike is now suing the company, the design company that is responsible for creating the shoes, and they're calling for a recall and collection of the shoes, and that's a whole thing.
Too similar or something?
Well, they're Nikes.
Oh, I thought that Nike just had nothing to do with the creation.
They didn't. This company just got the Nikes and designed the shoes and did whatever they did to them, customized them, added to them in whatever way. But there's certainly a big giant Nike swoosh on the side of them all.
Okay, they're gonna do that, aren't they?
Some athletes came out. I saw one, a very prominent mixed martial arts fighter named John Jones. He came out actively just sort of railing against Nike because he thought, what the hell is Nike doing? Now they're representing Satanism. They're making this okay. Fuck Nike. Before he realized they were suing, and that's a perception that a lot of people had. Of course, you're going to have those people on that side. So.
Yeah, that is funny. Nike gonna Nike. I'm so impressed at this narrative, because it's, like on one hand it could be like you're co-opting, somebody else's thing to just make money, but it's like, cool, great. Of all the people in the world who should be able to, It should be somebody who's suffered at the hands of homophobia and racism within these systems that are so deeply entrenched and has made people feel so bad for so long, for centuries, for millennia. You can absolutely subvert that imagery and then make money doing it. Yeah, go for it.
And that the same design company, I'm forgetting the name right now, but the very same company who did these Satan shoes with the drop of blood allegedly in there, that not so long ago, they made some Jesus shoes with some holy water from a specific place put inside them, and Nike did not sue.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. It's a whole wild world of stuff going on out there.
Yeah. Sounds like one got a lot more attention than the other.
Definitely. I don't remember the news about the Jesus shoes. It only came to light because of the Satan shoes.
Yeah. It would not even have ever entered my awareness.
No, same.
This is the only way I found out is directly from you.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this very much. Is there anywhere where anyone can follow you and catch up with what you're up to?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things. On Instagram, you can find me at Timba Lingling. I wanted to have HoneyTree. I wanted to have HoneyTree EvilEye on Instagram, but those were already taken by people who don't really post very often. And I'm mad about it. But Timba Lingling, and there's a link tree on there where you can see links to, I do professional fitness. So if you want to work out with me, we have like Metal Monday, and we have sword fights, and we have Pilates, and we have lots of stuff like that.
That's great.
And I have lots of burlesque shows, including the aforementioned metal burlesque troupe called Slut Church. It is exactly what it sounds like. So we have our 5-year anniversary show in April. If you want to register to get notified of the location for that. So yeah, you can find all that stuff at Timbalingling on Instagram. So
great.
Yeah.
I will make sure to put a link in the show notes for anybody listening. I feel like we probably have some listeners that might be interested in some of that.
Yeah, or if you just want to see my butt, that's also there.
That's there too. We'll definitely put a link to it in the description. Thank you so much. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take it easy. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed making it for you. If you've got a moment, visit the website at hailsatanpodcast.com. Do me a favor and stay safe out there, please. Until next time, Hail Satan.
Evil free service.